objectives. This is just what I talked through. Then here's the agenda that we're gonna go through, pretty straightforward. And again, these are the questions that Jacob posed this morning. They're kind of the guiding, overarching questions that we're trying to get to through the very detailed conversations about particular ideas overall. And then you can go to the next slide. So it's also important to recognize why we're here. The Tahoe Basin continues to have this pretty significant unmet need in terms of housing overall. These are the compilation of 3 different needs assessments that were done between 2019 and 2021, and they show a need of almost 7,500 housing units, with about half of those being for low and moderate income residents. And as Jacob mentioned this morning, we're in the process now of redoing the needs assessment for the entire Tahoe Basin plus Truckee as well. So those results should be due out later this year, and we'll be able to share those with you all. So we really understand the needs that we're really planning for here in the Tahoe region. Next slide. And then just a reminder, here's the vision and the project outcomes that we're really working towards as part of this process. These were developed through that community process over the fall last year and were adopted by the governing board in March of this year. I'm not going to go through them, but you're going to have an opportunity to evaluate each of these preliminary ideas against the intended project outcomes, which you have on your table and you can take a look at. But really want to make sure the ideas are meeting the intent of what we're trying to do as part of this process. Next slide. And then here's the overall process that Jacob walked through. I mean, we're really in this process where we're trying to make sure we captured all the ideas, generate any new ones, and then determine what ideas really move forward as the recommendations into the next phase of work, into phase 3. You can go to the next one. We're actually going to be going through a process. So we have this meeting here. We're working on scheduling community meetings, North Shore, South Shore. I think the 22nd and 23rd of July are the dates. We're going to have community meetings to kind of weigh in on some of these preliminary ideas. We'll be taking this for discussion to the governing board in August, and then we're going to be coming back to you in September to talk about the recommended ideas. So which ones move forward as part of this process, go through another round of community engagement, and then back to the governing board later this year, really to confirm which recommendations we're moving forward with. And then we'll start moving forward with things like policy and code revisions, as well as initiating the environmental impact statement, which is part of this process overall. So that's kind of high level of the background and process. And I'm going to hand it over to Jacob to talk a little bit more in detail about the development rights policy area, some at a high level before we get started. Jacob?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Okay, Jessica, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about, like Eric said, development rights, the topic of development rights, and what the briefing book says about development rights. So really the purpose of the discussion here, and hopefully we can make some movement on this, is to think about the ways that our development rights system can be made more supportive of workforce housing while still maintaining the environmental protections that it was originally intended to serve. So kind of getting to that lofty goal of this project. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the briefing book. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to at least take a look at the executive summary and maybe a little bit more. So the briefing book is intended to consolidate technical analysis, staff input, Tahoe Living Working Group recommendations, community engagement feedback that we've collected over the course of this process so far. It compares existing regulations in the code and policies in the regional plan with the intended outcomes for this project, and makes recommendations of policy ideas that could help reach our project goals. So it's meant to be a resource to help inform us about how we can move forward, inform these discussions, to help us move forward with the policy and policy ideas that we're going to pursue later in the project. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so I showed this slide this morning, but I think it's useful to look at it again this afternoon. So this talks about, this shows kind of the how, where, what, who, and how again, how much, of Tahoe's policies and regulations, as they relate to housing. So, you know, these are sort of the ways that TRPA policy influences housing, and I'll get more into how this relates to development rights in a couple slides. So, can you go to the next one? So yeah, we've, coming back to the briefing book, we've got, the briefing book was divided into these broad, policy areas, and one of those, there's no like, priority to this order. This is just the order of how they were laid out in the briefing book, but development rights really is an important bite of the apple that we're taking here in this project. And so within this development rights section, we'll be talking about some subtopics, including development rights pools, residential allocations, bonus units, banking conversion and transfers. These are all areas where development rights, policies and rules touch housing. And so there are areas where there's opportunity to make those policies more supportive of housing. Next slide. Okay, so this gets, I told you I'd come back to the how much and the where. So this is how development rights relate to those questions. Things like allocations, bonus units, transfer ratios relate to how much housing you can build. Caps, the cap that we have on residential units, that's how much you can build overall. Allocations relate to how much you can build in certain jurisdictions. Transfers, get more into, you know, if you have a development right here, you can transfer it to another location and potentially build more units. So this gets to the how much housing you can build. Then it also touches on where you can build housing in a similar way. So with transfers, certain incentives to build in town centers, as with bonus units. So these are the questions that we're looking at here. We should be thinking about as we're talking about development rights. Next slide. Okay, so a little overview of our development rights system. So development rights are a key piece of our growth management system here in Tahoe. At a really basic level, they cap the amount of new development that can be built in the basin. So that includes residential development, tourist accommodations like hotel rooms, and commercial floor area. So since we're talking about housing, we're gonna focus really mostly on residential development rights, which are also known as RUU. That stands for residential units of use. But you know, you can just call them residential development rights if you like, it's a little bit easier. And so these are formed by combining a potential residential unit. You can think about that as just at the most basic level, it's just a parcel that is undeveloped, but is zoned residential. So it has a potential unit of use. Combining that with a residential allocation. So residential allocation is the piece of the development right that's allocated by TRPA every 2 years. We release residential allocations, and when those allocations and PRUs are combined, you have a residential development right, and you can build a unit. So development rights can be banked and used later. They can be transferred between parcels, and sometimes you get bonus units for transferring from one parcel to another, depending on where that is. And they can be converted from one use, say from a commercial use, to another use, like a residential use. And so we have transfer ratios that tell us how how much you can get from converting one type of development right to another. Next slide. So this slide shows the ways that you can obtain a residential development right. Bonus units are an important piece here, so I'm gonna kind of focus on that. These are extra development rights that are given as an incentive for doing something that we consider to be socially or environmentally desirable. So for example, if you build deed restricted housing, then you can get bonus units for doing that. If you transfer development out of an environmentally sensitive area and into the town center, you can get a bonus unit for that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a summary of how many unused residential development rights we have right now. There's about 3,500 total. And with the potential for 2,500 more if, you know, all of the unused commercial and tourist units were to be converted into residential units, then that would be that 2,500 more that you see there. But really right now we've got about 3,500 that are unused. So bonus units, you can see bonus units make up the largest share of this number, followed by units that haven't been released as allocations yet, and unused allocations after that. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's get into some of the issues with that were identified in the briefing book.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Did that number of residential bonus or residential units include banked rights too?
The number of
last slide.
residential units.
Sorry.
Yeah, can you see?
The residential development rights pool, does that include banked units?
I don't know that off the top of my head, Eric. So
There's 493 banked units, and I'm trying to do the math quickly. This does not, I think, include the banked units.
Are bank units privately owned at all, or are they all just TRPA or
Okay.
local jurisdictions?
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it includes.
So the banked units are what Sophia is talking about would be, the banked units are unused units, but that are privately.
Privately owned?
Yes,
Okay.
and so these would be units that are not, that haven't been released yet.
Can I ask,
Thank you.
the 1,042 unreleased allocations, what's the process for getting those used?
So the unreleased allocations are, released every 2 years, yeah, to the local jurisdictions. And so those are the remaining units from the 2012 regional plan, and I think we run out of them in 2030.
32, that sounds right, 20 years after.
Yeah, okay. So as we continue to release those allocations, eventually they'll run out. And that will come down to zero by, 2032 or something like that. Okay, so yeah, issues. So this is a little summary of some of the issues that were identified in the briefing book with our development rights system as it relates to housing. And I think in this room, we should really just think of these as opportunities where development rights could better support housing. So they include that development rights can be expensive, and especially for multifamily projects where multiple units are needed. So I think, most of us know, but I'll just keep repeating it, that if you build one large home, that costs one development right, cost of a development right is about $28,500. If you want to build a 20-unit multifamily apartment complex, that's going to cost you 20 development rights, and so you can do the math on that. It's quite a bit more expensive. It costs more development rights, which, you know, have a value on the market, to build multifamily, housing.
Can I jump in and say?
Yeah,
something?
sure.
It's not that it's 20 times 28.5, it's a 10,000 square foot house is 28.5. 1,000 square foot multifamily is 28.5. So you would expect if you did more multifamily, you would pay more for rights, but the size of the unit is not taken into account right now.
Right, so there's the, you also have to think about the relative cost compared to the cost of the unit as well. The total cost of the development, and then it becomes, you know, that price tag increases. And so, yeah, to John's point, some of our incentives could be recalibrated to better incentivize the type of housing that we want to see, the type of housing that's affordable to our local workforce and desirable as well. Next slide. So, yeah, again, going back to John's point, development rights right now treat all units equal regardless of their size. So the cost burden is higher for smaller, more affordable housing relative to big, expensive houses. And multifamily parcels only get one potential unit of use, on their parcel. You need as many potential units of use as you have units, to build those units. So that means that they must obtain those, units elsewhere regardless of the size or the cost of the housing that they want to put in on that property. So that creates some issues. Next slide. Okay, so this is a little snippet from the executive summary from the briefing book, and this summarizes some of the ideas that we'll be talking about here this afternoon. So note from this list that anything we pursue in this project ultimately is going to undergo environmental analysis and potentially mitigation. So I think we can, you know, keep that in the back of your mind and understand that that's going to come later in the process, and hopefully we can have some good robust discussion about these ideas. Some of them include smaller, more technical changes, like small changes to the code, or to the regional plan, like adding bonus units. They include policy level changes, like reducing the number of development rights required for multifamily housing. They also include these bigger system level changes, like scaling development rights, saying that a development right is no longer worth a unit, but it's worth a particular amount of square footage. And if you want to go over that, you need to purchase more development rights. So this is sort of the scale that we're going to be talking about. We've got these small, medium, and large ideas, and all of them, you know, could potentially have some impact and some consequences. So let's think about all of that this afternoon.
All right, it's gonna come back to me, and I'm gonna talk about the exercises that we're gonna do. I'm gonna introduce those small group discussions. But before we do that, I just want to give folks like a second. This is highly technical. We already got a few questions that were asked about the material, but maybe if there's anyone online with a question about just the content, like the development rights program or any of the slides you saw that you will help clarify issues, not necessarily getting into the particular ideas that have been presented. We're gonna have a lot of opportunity for that, but just if there's any kind of clarifying questions about the development rights system or material that Jacob presented, maybe if you could just raise your hand in the Zoom room if you've got a question, or here if you want to just ask any kind of clarifying questions, and then I'll kind of talk through the interactive exercises for a second. Does anyone have any kind of clarifying questions?
I have a clarifying comment.
Hold on.
Erica Gonzalez has her hand raised.
Erica, you wanna go ahead?
I just had a clarification of the number of average, I think it's RUUs. You said it's at $28,000 that it takes to build. So like, how many average RUUs do people need to build? Like, and what's typical, I guess?
Well, for a single family home, they need one. And for a multifamily development, they need as many RUUs as they have units. So if they want to build 20 units, they need to buy 20 RUUs or figure out how to obtain 20 RUUs. These aren't always bought and sold. Sometimes they're obtained in different ways. But it's the RUU is equal to the unit of occupancy. Does that make sense?
Thank
One other
you.
way, one other way to answer that question too, Erica, is you could say in a town center, a project may be allowed to build up to 25 units per acre of land. So if you have a parcel that's 1 acre in size, you would need 25 of those rights to do your projects.
Thanks,
And then
that's
you
helpful.
still-
I'm just trying to figure out how much like the average cost for a developer would be. So that's very helpful. I appreciate it.
No problem. And is there anyone else online who has a question? Either feel free to see Mio, I think your hand is raised. Your physical hand.
Question, I have a question, clarification. Do you have to charge for these rights? What sets the price? Why do you have to charge people for the development right? Is that in the compact? What gives TRPA the authority to charge so much for the right to build a housing unit? Could that be revisited, the cost? Why is it set this way?
We don't charge, it's set on the market, so these are our commodities, we have a commodities-based system. And this is a commodity that has value that's set. by the
Value
market.
because they're so hard to get, therefore they are expensive, cost is,
Exactly.
you know. So therefore, you know, I'm just trying to get at the nut. The nut really is the cost. Anyway, just seeing, I hear what you're saying. You're just letting the market dictate it, which is basically a black market. And a black box.
Mia, our bonus units are free.
I know, but they come with strings.
Yes, so they're not free.
Right.
Jessica, did you have anything?
No, I was just gonna, Mia probably knows this, but like this, most local jurisdictions, we have appraisals done of them every year since we provide them. So that's where we base our costs that we sell them at to the public for, but we still, the city provides them for free for multifamily and ADUs.
But just ironically, for the RUUs, the more scarce they are, the more expensive and coveted they are. Therefore, if you make it harder to get, the more expensive they will be because they are not regulated. The non-bonus units, just to clarify. So for the average person who is a homeowner who wants to maybe build an ADU, or maybe they can put 4 ADUs, you know, they may or may not have the capacity to do a bonus unit, but they certainly have the capacity potentially to build maybe up to 4 units. But going through the gauntlet, finding them, dealing with all that is a barrier. Just putting that out there. So anyway, I just wanted clarification. Don't mean to start anything, but it's an interesting conversation. Looking forward to deep diving.
Great, thanks, Mia. Is there anyone else online who has a question or clarifying question on the presentation?
You should all be able to unmute yourselves freely, but I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, cool. And then John, I know you had a clarifying comment. I don't know if you want to make
You know,
that.
when Jacob was going through development rights, one of the things that we don't do with development rights is tie them to the impact. So if you're getting like a water hookup, they'll look at the number of fixtures. So a big house has a lot more fixtures, has a higher hookup fee. Smaller house, smaller, same way with wastewater connections. We don't do that. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out is we do look at the VMT impact, trip impact when we convert them, but we don't look at them. So it's kind of, to me, is, I think I know where Mia's going, but if you had 25 units on 1 acre, they would probably have a lot less traffic impact, especially if there's transit. And if you had one unit on 1 acre per unit. So the per unit impact is not calculated in what we charge for them, or what gets charged right now.
And let me just throw out one more piece on John's
Yeah.
comment.
Mia, hold on just a second. Sophia's got her hand raised first and then you can go.
I just have some questions on the fees in general that TRPA charges for developing. I would really be interested to see like a cost comparison of all the different fees that someone pays for a development that's a multifamily housing versus a single family, and just having a hard time like wrapping my head around of like, what do all those fees add up to be one versus other, and then how much is the impact related to the development rate cost versus the fee costs?
I think that's factored too.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot.
There's a lot No, and there's a lot of acknowledging there's a lot of overlap
Yeah.
between all these areas, right? That conversation, some of that conversation is happening over on the other side. Do you have any other clarifying questions?
I do have another question.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that the city of South Lake Tahoe provides, their development rights for free for ADUs and multifamily, that's what you said. Two questions. One, do other jurisdictions do this? If so, which ones? And two, do you have like people lining up your door? Like, how do you allocate those? Is the demand greater than what you have because they're free? Or it seems to be okay?
It's fine. The only deed restriction that we put on providing those rights for free is that they can't be a short-term rental. And so that's the only thing we've done. It's already really hard to build ADUs.
Yeah.
So, and multifamily are to find the properties for it, so it's not a huge lane, because I think council set aside, I think it was 72 TAUs, I think we increased it. So it breaks down a little bit different than that, but we haven't gone through all of that.
Okay, it's not like such a high demand, even though they're free.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so, sorry, I'm gonna just ask one clarifying question on that for the city. Then does the single family price, did that go up to compensate for the free multifamily and ADU?
No, we just use the appraised prices.
Okay. Any other, Mia, you might have had another clarifying question?
We'll talk when we get into the sessions, so
Okay, cool, yeah. And Jessica, you have a
Yeah.
clarifying question? Okay.
Going off what John was saying, so when the development rights system was developed, there was this number of allocations that were provided, so it wasn't provided on an impact like because this is something we were talking about in our group earlier, so it wasn't based on, let's say, 1,200 square foot home and what that impact is, it was just artificial.
Based on building out regional plan that much more.
So it wasn't really based on,
It wasn't based on so many small, so many big.
just X number of units.
Yes, number of units.
So it's more like the impact of the persons occupying the units than the impact of the units themselves.
Yeah, the EIS said we're
Yeah.
we're at 48,000 units, we're gonna go to
This many.
55,000, so.
But there was nothing contemplated about the size.
No, in fact, this is probably a little bit more detailed than we need to go into, but I'll do it. The mitigation measure the biggest mitigation measure for the environmental impact statement in 2012 was housing. You already got a housing problem, and this growth management system makes it even more difficult, more challenging. So you need to do something. So we had a group do a study, BAE, is the name of the company. And they said, you ought to look at your development rights that you have in separate pools, because you couldn't move them.
Yeah.
And so we had you probably participated or somebody from the city, somebody from the city. We had a group with our board members and others who came up with this conversion process. So, because the idea is, you remember, a lot of retail was going on the internet, so there wasn't a demand for retail space, but there was a demand for housing. So we figured out using trips as a way to convert from one to another, to allow the conversions between the three pools. And so that was the first round of mitigation for housing coming out of the 2012 regional plan. This obviously has taken that another step.
Thank you.
That helps.
Yeah, absolutely does. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna just take us then to the interactive exercises and just talk for the next few minutes about those exercises. We're gonna have basically the rest of the time to talk. So you wanna go to the next slide? We're gonna do this for about the next 2 hours or so, gonna be a little bit less probably. We're gonna do small group discussion and then individual idea evaluation. So then we're gonna have this, we're gonna then take a few minutes to do a large group report back and have a discussion across the different tables and online. And then finally, we're gonna do a final idea evaluation, and then we're gonna post things up on the big board on the other side of this wall. You can go to the next slide. So the small groups is just most of your time. You have a facilitator, so either it's Simran at group 1, I think, myself at group 3, John at group 2, and then I believe I think Michelle is online for our online folks. You're just gonna do a very quick round of introductions, although we just did that, so it's not a big deal. We need someone to be a note taker and a report back person from each group and table. And then once you do that, your facilitator is just gonna orient you to what's on your table. So you have a number of materials that you're gonna use to work through your idea evaluation at your table or online. You're gonna complete an independent evaluation of 1 or 2 different of the preliminary ideas that were associated with your sub-policy area in the briefing book. You can feel free to add additional ideas. If you think something is missing, please take a minute, fill out a worksheet. You're gonna have 10, 15, 20 minutes to do that. And then we're gonna have a discussion at your table. We had 80 minutes. We started a little late today, spent a little bit more time on discussion, so we'll drop that number down a little bit. And as you go, just identify any missing ideas. So if there's something that you don't see for your area, do it as you're going. You don't have to do it at the very end. No need to wait to the very end to identify those missing ideas. So you're gonna do these kind of 3, 1 to 2 steps process at each of the small groups and online independently. Next slide. You're basically, when you're evaluating your ideas, we have a worksheet for you in front of you at your table. You're basically gonna do 3 things. You're gonna take your idea and you're gonna consider the intended project outcomes that were approved by the board back in March. So how well does the idea align with the intended project outcomes across resilient communities, housing choice, and trust and building trust with the community? And then you're gonna take your policy idea and you're gonna evaluate it on a matrix. You're gonna be asked, how easy is it to implement? With 1 being the hardest and 5 being the easiest. And then you're gonna be asked how impactful that idea is. So what's the positive beneficial impact of that? Is it low? 1. Is it high? A 5. So we're gonna just ask you to put it onto a grid. We don't expect you all to be experts in all of this, but you all have different perspectives and ideas. Some of you are coming from the jurisdictional perspective, some nonprofits. We have folks in the development community here. So we're here to hear everybody's ideas from their own perspectives about these particular ideas. And then finally, there's a question at the end about anything you'd like to change about this idea, or anything that you think needs to happen before this idea can be implemented, or with this idea. So things that need to happen concurrently overall. So you're gonna take about, so you can go to the next slide. So about 10 minutes or so to do that, 20 minutes to do that. At your table, you'll have these worksheets to fill out, pretty simple. And then you also have a list of the preliminary ideas from the briefing book. You have a briefing book, but if you want to just go to the ideas themselves, you can go to your section and then just go through the ideas, and everyone should select. Ideally, we'd like you to select different ideas. So Sophia and Jessica, you're not evaluating the same ideas, but you're doing 2 or 3 that are separate from one another that we can get a good range of things overall. Good, next slide. So I don't need to go through this. These are just good manner agreements. Listen to everyone at your table. Try not to talk over anyone. You can be visionary. You can be actionable, because I think all of us have different levels of experience and knowledge bringing to this. So feel free to come at it from your perspective that you think is most appropriate. This is an opportunity for us to be in the weeds. So if you have things that are super weedy, tell us, that's great. But we can also accept and hear things that are at a higher level. Next slide. And then I think this is just important to recognize that we all have different levels of expertise and experience working with the development rights system here in the basin. Some of us come from very technical backgrounds, some from a more community background. Our experiences are all gonna be different and we're gonna get feedback in lots of different ways. So just recognize that other people's perspectives are going to be different than yours, and that together we come with a better perspective as a group than as individuals doing this exercise themselves. All right, and I think with that, hang on a second. Yeah, that's my last slide.
We, the two groups, the two members of this group, there are 6 ideas total.
Yep.
So after each one does 3, do you want them to do the other 3 or just?
I would start with the first 2 and see how each person with 2 and see how far you get to with that. And if we have time for a third one, let's pull it in. We want to just make sure you have enough time to do it in enough detail. So start with 2 ideas first. And if you have 6, you can go to 3 ideas, the third idea separately. Yeah, and I think maybe your name is Peter, maybe Peter, we will have you join one of these other 2 groups, and then we can have 3 people in these groups. I know we have folks online who are also doing the banking conversions and transfers as well, so I think we'll have you do another group. All right. All right, let's go. Facilitator, take it away. 8 hours or so, it seems like. So just encourage everyone just to move around a little bit. If you're on Zoom, feel free to turn your video off and stretch or whatever you want to do. But what we're going to do for the next 20 minutes is just do a quick report back. We had 2 tables here in our room, one on the development rights pool and then one on the residential allocation and residential bonus units. And then we had folks who were online on the Zoom room who did ideas and evaluated ideas and talked about ideas across all of the different areas, including banking, conversion, and transfers as well. So what I'm gonna do is we have report back heroes for our teams here, for our tables here, and then Antonio online as well, who's gonna do some report back for the online group. But let's just start in the first subsection of the policy area on the development rights pool. Jessica, we'll start with you, and then Antonio, you're going to go next. Just tell us a little bit about kind of what you talked about at a high level. Are there particular ideas that you thought had higher impact, higher beneficial impact? It might be higher beneficial impact and higher or lower difficulty to implement. So maybe just kind of talk a little bit about your group, Jessica, first, and what you discussed.
Okay, I took notes by policy, but I'll just say that overall, we did talk a lot and have an emphasis on local housing instead of for second homes or vacation homes, whatever it may be. I think a lot of these overall is, we wanted more information and more details to it, because a lot of it was like the devil's in the details and how it's implemented, how it's studied, all of those things, and whether, there's a flip side to several of them, whereas like within the public process, it's taken up the public or all of us a long time to understand how development rights work. So switching it could create either confusion or more transparency for people, either way. I'm just going through these to not go too into the details. We said that most of these policies actually met a lot of those goals, the working group goals of like resilient communities, housing choice outcomes, and trust in community building outcomes. We talked a lot about where, how easy it was to implement and different experiences across, like, we talked a lot about like the differences in what is happening in the North Shore versus in South Lake. And how we see different needs across the region and what we think of how we think a policy would be implemented in one place versus the other. Cause I'm like, oh, it wouldn't work here, but it would work in North Shore or so. Are there any other big highlights you want to add, either of you?
I think that's pretty much it. I think for us, it was a lot of it just like needing more information. Hard to say, like, we think it would meet these goals, but like really to know what the details are and the next, especially on that first one with the square footage versus the development rights. It's like, how does that work? How do you tie the square footage to the impact to the fee? I mean, all those things sort of like go together, and so we want to have a study that really dives into some of those details to understand what all the impacts would be and the benefits would be. So information, but
Yeah, we heard a little bit in the group too, in response to the prompts about impact versus difficulty, and the answer is often it depends. Right, on the details of how you actually take that idea that's listed and actually make it into policy and make it into code language and how it's implemented across the region. So we definitely heard that, I know, at the group 2 table as well. Did you rank any ideas as having high beneficial impact, or did you kind of steer away from the impact exercise?
We didn't rank them by impact. That was something we did not do.
Okay.
We did rank them, but we did talk about like the additional bonus units seem like easier to implement and had a pretty high bang for the buck.
for some places, but then she's saying in South Lake Tahoe, that didn't really matter. So like that was where we kind of had those like more nuanced Northborough Beach Tahoe discussions too.
Great, that's awesome. Antonio, you got charged with the report back for the folks online. Anything you want to talk about related to the ideas in the development rights pool?
Sure. Well, we went all over all four ideas. I think overall we said like it's easy to probably like implement, or at least just changing what was said. But in terms of the exact impact, I mean, we didn't necessarily find that it would impact the folks that are the stakeholders that we're hoping for, specifically low income individuals. I think some of the themes are, especially like when we consider DR1 and 2, like square feet versus units, and improve access to residential development rights, and like or having a bank or having additional bonus units. It still doesn't necessarily resolve concerns about being able to find those units and the cost that it takes to absorb them. And I think when we talked about the conversions for single family homes to duplexes, again, that can create maybe a little bit larger impact, but we have to also kind of consider there's still the issue of having to receive the units that needed to build more, and to maybe it could be more beneficial, and if folks could jump in to maybe explain some of the solutions we were talking about having it more, you have already zone areas to already allow the right to build to match more of the zoning versus having to buy particular units in order or find particular use to make it work.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what was talked about too at the table I was at. Not just that it depends on its implementation, but it also depends on what other ideas are implemented at the same time and how far you pull the levers for each of those different ideas. So looking at just square feet versus units, it also is related to process and costs and other policy topic areas that we're discussing as well. So it's not just one or the other, it's all of them combined in different ways to help us achieve those outcomes. Go ahead.
Just to add, like we talked about, it's one thing to have like a central bank in terms of units, RUs, but also to have it also be able to help distribute, things regarding like infrastructure and money and things that are grants that are available in other avenues. So that way it could be really just like a one-stop shop bank versus something on a very specific piece of development, but doesn't necessarily answer the issues regarding like infrastructure. That could be a barrier.
Great, thanks, Antonio. I'm going to move us to the second table now, which is on residential bonus units and the residential allocation. And I think Emily's going to report back here in the room. And then if Antonio, if you had additional thoughts that were brought up by the group online next.
Yeah, I think Chris might wanna report a little bit too.
Yeah, to
but-
save Emily having to digest my thoughts, I thought.
Yeah, please,
Yeah.
no, please, go ahead, Chris.
You go ahead, Emily.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the streamlining and clarifying steps to residential bonus unit access and expanding the residential bonus unit pool. Both of these I thought would be effective to meet the resilient communities income. I think more clarification is always good, and having higher local worker population is good to create the active, economically stable community. For housing choice outcomes, I think both of them, my thoughts were unsure, because I think in order to be effective, they'd have to be paired with other things. And I think that was my theme of everything I talked or looked at, was I'd want to also see multifamily allowed by right, not only at the jurisdictional level, but also at TRPA, and no design review, and scaled mitigation fees, and scaled development rights. So all of it together, and it was really hard to think of just one alone, or my brain couldn't do that very well. For the trust and community building outcomes, I think that was, I think these things could increase trust. But again, I think it comes down to like an auditing and more, investigation to see how our residential bonus units are being used now, and how they would be used in the future, and what size are they going towards, and how, like, what affordability levels are they going towards. So as far as ease of implementation, I think that was hard to do too, because it'd be easy to make the change, but then I think there could be a lot of layers of considerations that would need to be incorporated. About timing and how they're expanded and what pools, and is it the same pool as affordability levels, or the different pools? And I think this just came down to a lack of detail. It was hard to conceptualize, but potentially good. Chris?
Yeah, so I was asked to look at allocations. There's one thought, one of the preliminary ideas is to allocate to jurisdictions that are making progress on multifamily housing. And in other words, they get rewarded more. And there was some concern about what about the housing, the jurisdictions that aren't making as much progress? How do you deal with that issue? It shouldn't be a zero-sum situation. So that was a concern. This idea of rewarding other jurisdictions for their progress wouldn't be a barrier to incentivizing housing that's affordable. It may simplify the process, but it really depends on what the jurisdictions who get these awards, how they handle those allocations. So that was one of the allocation issues. Another one was making residential units more easily accessible. And that would, of course, probably make the community quite happy, as in trust and community building outcomes. It wouldn't address housing choice outcomes. It just gives out units. And so it has a limited effect. But again, tied in with a bunch of other aspects, other rules, other programs, other regulations, and it might just be wonderful. And then the last one is housing job location. In other words, housing and job co-location. Add a criterion for distribution of residential allocations that they must be linked to co-location. Well, that depends on what your employment community wants, what the employers want. And so you're going to need to do a dive into what that community wants, but then you have to deal with the issue of what's the community going to look like, the job community going to look like in 20 years. Is all the construction going to be done? So what's the big job demand in that community? So the future is unknown, especially in this AI age, so that's one of the issues that somebody would have job location allocations. And that's it.
All right, thanks, Chris and Emily. Antonio, I would go to you. Do you have any, can you talk a little bit about your discussions around either the residential allocations or the residential bonus units? And then I think some of you worked on the transfers, banking and conversions area as well. So if you want to share any discussion that was had in your online group about that policy topic area as well.
To be honest, we really were at development and rights pool, and that's kind of where we really focused a lot of our discussion and energy. I mean, a lot of what we talked about there, kind of especially like about the centralized bank and kind of simplicity of the RUUs. It kind of crosses over among all these tools. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Let me throw out a couple things. Antonio's done a great job and he took our notes. This is Mia. What I'd like to also say around the RUUs is, can we tie it? So one idea that we talked about is tying RUUs to the actual zoning. If you're 15 units to the acre, it's one RUU for 15 units because the parcel's zoned 15 units to the acre. You know, instead of parsing out this sort of sign, you know, having consultants, hiring all these people to figure out what the equivalencies are and doing all kinds of exotic math, you know, residential bonus units, the allocation doesn't build the housing. It's just the right to build the housing. So there's many more bites at the apple when it comes to like impact fees or environmental analysis and all these things. But if the zoning was already prepared, like the TVAP, South Lake Tahoe, 24 units to the acre, you know, instead of going to find 23 RUUs, maybe the equivalency is because the zoning's already there and the impact's already there. It's one residential unit of use because it's already been designated for multifamily housing. That's one idea.
Great, thanks, Mia. Anyone else want to share an idea or thoughts that you had during this exercise? Either, maybe we'll start with folks online. Anyone else in the Zoom room want to share anything else that you talked about or were thinking about during these exercises that you want to share with everybody else?
There's no hands raised.
Yeah.
But they don't unmute themselves.
Oh, I totally forgot to do something too. We need someone from this group to report back tomorrow afternoon to the big group. Can I get a volunteer? All right, you can think about it. Otherwise, I'm gonna volunteer somebody. All right, anyone else in here want to share anything that you thought about or talked about at your table that didn't come up yet, but think might be helpful? Jacob's got his hand raised.
I just wanted to bring up something that we've talked about in the office over the last few years, but I didn't hear it come up here. Maybe you did. I just wasn't there. But we've talked about this, you know, so we have these we allow these conversions from commercial to residential or from tourist accommodation to residential. One thing that we've seen occasionally is you know, conversions going to luxury residential housing. And that's wasn't really the intention of having the conversion ratio. So maybe something that we could consider is you know, limiting that or preventing that from happening in the future from conversions going to luxury housing.
Strongly disincentivizing.
Strongly distance or prevent, you know, we could prevent it, honestly. We could say that conversions are only for deed restricted housing and, you know, I don't.
Yeah, we're seeing that happen too.
Yeah, you guys have seen it, Washoe, it happens in Washoe, Douglas, all over the lake.
We talked about this idea in our group too.
Okay, nice.
Came up.
So
We've also seen a loss or a trend or interest in converting CFA to other uses, and we're worried about losing our CFA.
Right, yeah, actually, it reminds me of the city too, like along Ski Run, you have commercial that's going to like luxury short-term rentals.
Yeah, which is commercial.
Which is considered commercial, but not really like what we think of. So, yeah, stuff to like, how do we is there something that we can do to disincentivize the loss of CFA to, or prevent the loss of CFA to luxury housing?
Well, one of the things we've also talked about too is this notion that there is an amount of commercial floor area that's important for the function of the region, right? So how do we maintain enough amenity space, commercial retail service space to support the needs of community members, right? Getting at the resilient communities part of this as well. And so what's that kind of minimum amount of commercial space you need in different parts of the region? So that even if you are converting some, you still maintain enough of that space so that you don't have to go outside of the region to meet all those amenity and service needs that you have as a resident of the region.
Yeah.
So think about that too.
Yeah, another thing we've talked about and as staff, to hit at that is, maybe, requiring that any residential in town centers is mixed use. Because mixed use are commercial centers. We're incentivizing residential there, but we don't want to incentivize it to the detriment of having commercial centers at all. So.
Can I add something? This is Mia about commercial. I've heard directly from business owners, like say from Kings Beach, that tell me their buildings are irrelevant because they don't have the money to fix them up, get the kitchens upgraded, do all the life safety, whatever's necessary, the BMPs, etc. So what you end up with are people selling their businesses, their buildings, because they can't not afford what it costs to renovate, to bring them up to par so they can charge more for their omelets, or whatever it's going to take. So maybe on the flip side, so the reason it seems like maybe you're having this conversion is people are selling old stock because they don't have the wherewithal to redevelop it into commercial. And they're selling it to people who then are converting the CFA into luxury residential because luxury residential is the only thing that pencils without subsidy.
Yeah, we see that too.
So maybe the flip side is if you want to keep businesses in Tahoe, maybe there's loan programs, that you can keep businesses who want to keep their grills open, to loan them money so that they can stay in business and keep employers in. So it isn't just these allocations that are the cause for this. People have to understand the market conditions on the ground.
Can I say something too?
Emily and then Michelle.
Okay. One of the things I was thinking about when I was looking at expanding the residential bonus unit pool, is when paired with the categorization of affordability that's required right now. So there's a certain amount of affordable, low income, a certain amount moderate, certain amount achievable. Sort of. I worry that in the end, we'll use up all of the bonus units allowed to achievable. And then maybe the moderate ones too, but anything left that was left for affordable, I think won't get used because we don't have subsidies. And it's a great intent and idea pie in the sky to say, well, we got to reserve a certain amount for affordable, but if it's never going to get built because the only subsidy out there is TCAC and we only have so much land available for tax credit housing, then what do we do with that in the end? And I feel like we're kind of being short-sighted and seemingly altruistic, but not being realistic about using our bonus units to get to the point of money too that Mia was talking about. Like without substantial subsidies, we just will not see under 80% AMI housing.
Great, thanks, Emily. Michelle.
So one comment that was made along the similar lines of financial and sort of being able to support, whether it's the developer or housing, somebody who wants to qualify, or what other type of subsidies or incentives that could be initiated with some sort of financial banking and, kind of just getting innovative with financing, sort of like a revolving loan fund, which I'm familiar with as a program through EPA has it for brownfields and cleanup purposes. So you could have this qualification through a loan. Yes, you'd need seed money. Maybe it's not through a grant, so you're tied to the criteria of a grant, but of creating this place to go for some financial backing as a loan that gets paid back into the system and then goes back out to help somebody else for whatever reasons of upgrading their equipment or, you know, dilapidated housing that's aging, what have you. That was something that was brought up.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Any last thoughts from anyone online who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? From, I don't know if there's any, working group members or CPG members who haven't gotten an opportunity to chime in online? And just feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, we have one last pretty small activity, which and then we can all take off for the afternoon. But for those of you who did the evaluations, for each of your ideas, if you estimated impacting and the complexity of them, you may or may not have done that. Not everybody did. If you did, if you could take a few minutes to write the name of the idea, and the number and your name or your group name on it. And we have a board on the other side of this wall here, which is the same 5x5 grid that you have on your piece of paper. We'll give you a minute to do that. I know not everybody did it. Some of you maybe only ranked things on one part of the quadrant. That's fine too. You can add those and post those on the other side of the board as well. But if you just take a few minutes to do that, and then you're welcome to write them on your Post-it notes, walk over to the other side of this board and pop them on the board on the other side. And tomorrow afternoon, when we're at our 1 p.m. meeting, when we're doing our kind of closing and wrap up, we're going to summarize in each of these groups. So our development rights one, the one that's ongoing right now, and then tomorrow the development standards and zoning. We'll summarize a little bit of those conversations, and we'll talk about how folks ranked some of the different ideas, at least initially. So take a minute to do that. And then I didn't get anybody to volunteer yet to be our report back hero tomorrow afternoon, but is there anyone who's going to be here who's willing to do it?
I'll be here. Emily and me will tag team it.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, great. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Emily, for being our heroes. So just take a minute and on your sticky notes, for folks who are online, if you want to take an idea and write it down and then rank it and then drop it in the chat to us here, that's also fine. Or you could bring your ideas tomorrow and we can post them on the board tomorrow if you're here in person. Reminder, we start at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're going to be talking about the policy area of development rights and standards. Same exercise, same format. Only difference is going to be talking about zoning and development standards. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And really appreciate everyone sticking around long. We know it's a long day. So appreciate it.